Israel's former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has died at the age of 85, having spent 8 years in a coma caused by a stroke.
It's a normal thing to visit the Temple Mount, and every Jew can visit the Temple Mount exactly as every Arab can visit any other place in the country. And though all of us would like to have peace, all of us are committed to peace, I cannot see any possibility for a real peace if Jews were not allowed to go to the holiest place that belongs to them. Jews will be visiting the Temple Mount, their most sacred place, the holiest of the holiest, also in the future. But one thing what worries me is when I see what happened there, I just think what will happen if Jerusalem will be divided, as Barak agrees to do already. How many forces will have there to be able to live there peacefully? We are looking for peace, but for us peace means security. For us peace means that everyone will be able to go and visit the holiest place, will be able to pray. I would say that is the simplest thing. I would say it's so obvious in democracies where both of us live. And therefore, I'm sure that the sovereignty over the Temple Mount, it's in our hands now. It will be in our hands in the future. That will be the future.
The Chaim Shiva Medical Center at Tel HaShomer announces in sorrow that former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has passed away. Mr. Sharon was treated for over 7 years in the Medical Center Rehabilitation Hospital. Throughout this period, he was considered to be in a state of minimal consciousness, with ups and downs in his medical condition and non-verbal minimal communication. Over the past week, he struggled with surprising strength and determination against the deterioration in his condition. Today, he departed peacefully with his loving family at his side.
His life was one of the most controversial in modern Middle East history. Ariel Sharon's public life had him shifting constantly between the role of villain and hero with his own Jewish people. But nicknamed the bulldozer, he was unstoppable. Sharon fought in all of Israel's wars. He was shot in the abdomen in 1967 and caught the attention of Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, by creating Commando 101, Israel's premier elite fighting force. Promoted to general, Sharon led Israeli forces across the Suez Canal in the 1973 Yom Kippur War and got his first taste of hero status. But 9 years later, after a peace deal was struck with Egypt and Israel gave up the Sinai Peninsula, it was Sharon's task to forcibly evacuate the Jewish settlements on the Sinai. Then he got his first taste of villain status. All the while, Sharon was growing as a politician, championing the construction of the new settlements on land captured in the 1967 war and encouraging Jews to move there. As defense minister in 1982, Sharon's relationship as nemesis to Yasser Arafat began when Israel invaded Lebanon. Israelis took casualties. Sharon took the blame. Then, when a Christian militia backed by Israel slaughtered hundreds of Palestinians in Lebanon's Sabra and Shatila refugee camps, Ariel Sharon was accused of turning his back and allowing the massacre. 400,000 Israeli protesters packed what is today Rabin Square in Tel Aviv. They demanded Sharon's removal as defense minister. An inquiry followed and recommended that Sharon be removed and never allowed to serve as defense minister again. He left the government in shame. But the bulldozer kept rolling. He returned as foreign minister. He was present at the Y River talks in Maryland, where Yasser Arafat claims they shook hands. After the Camp David talks in the year 2000, Israelis felt then Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered Palestinians too much. Yasser Arafat felt it wasn't enough and refused. The two sides were filled with pressure and ready to ignite. Ariel Sharon provided the spark. He made a trip to the heart of the controversy, the Wailing Wall and Haram al-Sharif. Palestinians saw this leader they consider bloodthirsty and evil walk through one of their most revered sites. One day later, there was a riot and bloodshed at the complex. The Palestinian uprising, or Intifada, began. Ehud Barak was toppled as prime minister, and Israelis elected the strongest figure on their political landscape, Ariel Sharon. Israeli and Palestinian blood flowed in the following flurry of suicide bombings and military reprisals. Sharon rolled tanks and bulldozers into the West Bank and confined Yasser Arafat to his own Muqata compound, all the while refusing to negotiate with his career-long enemy and the leader of the Palestinians. Pressured from the international community and by Palestinian attacks, Sharon said his view was now different from the Prime Minister's office. He turned against the occupation and the settlements he once championed, forcing a plan to withdraw all Israeli soldiers and settlers from the Gaza Strip and a small part of the West Bank. Sharon's opponents in government reluctantly embraced the plan. Some members of his own coalition turned their backs on him. Sharon became the target of death threats from extremists who believe it is a sacrilege for anyone to keep Jews from every inch of the Promised Land. The withdrawal was painful for Israel, as 7,500 settlers and thousands of demonstrators were forcibly removed from the Gaza Strip. The Israeli public watched scenes of Jew fighting Jew. The withdrawal was a success, but Sharon emerged with his government in turmoil. His former allies on the right within his own party turned on him. For political survival, Sharon was forced to leave the Likud party, which he founded. He formed the new, more centrist Kadima party. With Sharon's massive political gravity, polls showed Kadima was instantly the most popular political party in Israel. Sharon appeared on his way to a third term as prime minister. A week before Christmas 2005, Sharon suffered what was described as a mild stroke. 3 days later, he was back on his feet, resuming the duties of prime minister, appearing once again to be unstoppable. But within 3 weeks, Sharon suffered another stroke, this one described as massive. Sharon's final battle was the one for his life, fought and lost in hospital. In Jerusalem, Mike Tobin, Fox News.
One of the country's most iconic politicians and military leaders passed away just days after his condition worsened dramatically. From the Lebanon war to Israel's disengagement from Gaza, Sharon's years in politics were marked by several historic decisions. But what he's likely to do and to be remembered for by many Israelis is the controversial issue of settlements in the West Bank, as RT's Paula Slier reports.
Ariel Sharon cut a divisive figure between those who loved him and those who certainly didn't. But all agree Ariel Sharon was undoubtedly the father of the Israeli settler movement. Under his guidance, more than 100 settlements were built on the Gaza Strip. His motto, to defend and preserve the Jewish state. Ezra Eldar was a lifelong supporter of Ariel Sharon. For 27 years, he farmed spices and flowers in the former Gaza settlement of Gnei Tal.
He was the builder of settlements. Even in ours, he built 20 new homes, just like he did in other places. We saw him as the father of the settlers, and he did so much for us.
But 8.5 years ago, Ezra, his wife and 3 children were forced out of their Gaza home, along with 8,000 others. His hero had become his enemy.
I feel betrayed, like a husband who walked into his home to find his wife with his neighbor. Sharon will most likely be praised as he should be, but I would also like him to be remembered for all the things that are not so pleasant and which were critical to all of Israel.
The longtime champion of Jewish settlements in the occupied territories came to believe there'd be more trouble than they were worth. And because Sharon was the one who built them, it came as a shock that he was the one to destroy them.
At the end of the day, he looked at them as instrumental for whatever needs he had at the moment. When he thought that the settlers and the settlement movement were serving the needs of a stronger Israel, he supported them, and he supported them more than anyone had. But when he felt that they were no longer serving the needs of a strong Israel, then he turned against them.
So much so, there was a total disengagement from Gaza. Despite the anger it evoked among his supporters, Sharon looked set to return as prime minister in fresh elections. But in 2005, he suffered a stroke from which he never recovered. After withdrawing from Gaza, Sharon ruled out any further unilateral withdrawals. But the settlements he built continue to be a major sticking point in negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. Paula Slier, RT, Tel Aviv.